In this episode of My Think Tank, we turn our attention to the definition of relations between the United States of America and the European Union. The document, National Security Strategy, suggests that America aims to find a mode of peaceful coexistence with China and to devote greater attention to the American continent. In practice, none of these external extremes are realistic. Competition with China will intensify and create unavoidable tensions, but that does not necessarily mean direct military confrontation. Historical lessons show that major systemic changes can happen without open warfare. Europe remains indispensable to America. Without influence on the old continent, Washington cannot maintain its global primacy. The current US administration seeks to shape Europe's political and social order in ways more favorable to American interests. Suggestions that America will withdraw entirely are implausible. Doing so would expose the United States so significant strategic risk. Three elements of the documents are realistic. First, Washington expresses an openness to cooperation with Russia in the context of its relationship with China. Second, it signals to Europeans that their support will remain relevant in balancing China. Third, it warned against the federalization of the European Union, favoring a return to more sovereign national political aligned with certain American interests. Recent polls among Republican constituents show strong support for an assertive global role and continued backing for NATO, revealing that some political narratives do not fully represent the view of the broader base. There remains broad support in the US for continued American engagement in global affairs, including a willingness to respond should a NATO member be attacked. Historically, US involvement in Europe has been sustained for decades. During the Cold War, American efforts aimed to limit communist influence and to consolidate transatlantic ties through economic, political, and intelligence cooperation. The Marshall Plan and NATO are examples of long-term engagement that shaped post-war Europe. However, the European Union has structural weakness. The removal of borders and the creation of single market were significant achievements, but deeper political integration stalled in mid-2000s. The EU struggles to produce unified foreign, defense, or economic policy because member states often prioritize national interest over common ones. This fragmentation has exposed the Union to internal political movements and external influence campaigns. Europe faces two broad options. One is further fragmentation and renewed sovereignism. The other is pragmatic federalization, using economic strengths to become a credible military and strategic actor capable of defending its interests. The latter would require serious reform and stronger integration to grant Europe strategic autonomy. Propaganda from global rivals seeks to portray Europe as weak and declining, but this narrative ignores Europe's strengths: high spending on health, social care, and protections for vulnerable populations. The EU's social model and institutional frameworks remain substantive achievements. The National Security Strategy diagnoses several real problems facing Europe: economic stagnation, demographic decline, slow technological progress, and migration pressures. Accurate diagnosis does not imply that the proposed remedies are correct. some prescriptions risk empowering nationalist and populist forces and encouraging de-integration. Domestic political dynamics in the United States complicate matters. Some American actors prioritize followers over allies, pressuring Europe to adopt positions more in line with an American nationalist agenda. Yet, institutional constraints, including the role of Congress and bipartisan interest in defense, limit abrupt unilateral changes. The strategy advanced by some U.S. actors rests on three pillars: protecting supply lines and border, threatening influence in the Western Hemisphere, and addressing China. In practice, that has meant policies prioritizing American interests even at the expense of deeper transatlantic cooperation. Europe's internal divisions, political fragmentation, divergent migration policies, and the influence of sovereignist leaders weaken its ability to respond coherently to external pressures. The EU inability to present a unified foreign policy complicates decisive actions in crisis, including Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Despite its challenges, Europe retains significant economic and social capital. The task is political. Mobilize the will to translate those strengths into a coherent strategic posture that requires tackling corruption, strengthening democratic institutions, and pursuing pragmatic reforms that enhance collective security. A strong, integrated Europe would be stabilizing force in the global affairs. Weakening the EU would create strategic vacuums that other powers could exploit. The debate about Europe's future influences policy choices on defense, migration, economic integration, technology, and the protection of democratic institutions. Well, that would be enough for this episode, and we'll continue in the next one. Until then, catch you later.